Everyone, it's Dr. Eric, the fitness physician, with another episode of the Relentless Vitality Podcast. I am super excited about a very cool guest, a legend in the field, Mr. John Parrillo, based out of my home state of Cincinnati, Ohio. He probably needs no introduction, but he's been in the business for a very long time and a legend in the bodybuilding space, nutrition, fitness, supplementation, etc. So, John, how you doing, my man? Thanks for jumping on.
I'm doing great.
Good, excellent. Well, as I said, I know you've been doing this for a very long time, very, very long time, and you met probably some really cool people, and you probably got all kinds of good stories. So,
Yeah,
um,
I got stories.
tell me a little bit about, I guess, tell our listeners about your journey. I guess, like how you got started. Maybe you can tell us a couple of really good stories along the way about people you've met, some lessons learned, thoughts for the future in the world of fitness and bodybuilding, etc.
Yeah, how I got started in this. I was a friend of mine he was he was captain of Xavier's defensive football team, in a college level. And
Right.
I'm Italian, he's Italian. He's Roman Italian. I came from some farmers somewhere. So he has the broad shoulders and the big V in that. And I'm like just eh, nothing special. You go, hey, look, that's a nice physique. So, but we were working out and they had the Mr. Cincinnati. I said, Tony, you ought to get into Mr. Cincinnati. He took a couple minutes and I will if you will. Okay, it was on. So
Threw
I
down the
went
gauntlet.
and got strength and health. Okay. And it's muscle and fitness, but strength and health.
Yeah.
And I opened it up and I did what all the pros were doing. I bought those bottles of 16-ounce bottles of cherry flavored collagen.
Ooh.
And that's you just drank one more, 3 times a day, you drank one. And that's where actually people going on diets like that, since there was like no potassium, it actually cost some people their lives. But I remember I got so weak and lost so much muscle. I remember getting out of a chair, standing up, I'd be lightheaded. And it was like, whoa. And here I had spent 8 years in the analytical sciences. And I said, well, wait a minute, there's got to be a better way. So I went to the library, Dewey Decimal System, looked up all kind of stuff. And just there wasn't anything on what I needed. It was just all low calories, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, okay, I'm going to start making a science of this. Best thing I learned was the scientific method. So I went down to Spatz Health Food, which is still there, and bought a USDA handbook number 8, nutritional contents of foods. So I started logging my diet. And by that time, I was working with a pretty group of people who were hard competitors. One of them, Donnie Gay won the light heavyweight USA, and guys that were really good. And so I started logging the diet and seeing how it affected, how's my workouts going, what's my body weight doing. And it's my diet track sheets are right out of the USDA nutritional contents of food, but calories, protein, fats, carbs, sodium, potassium. And so then I said, okay, I need to, this time by this time I was working, since I had a little system and here's the diet track sheets and that, you start working with more and more people. Well, I said, hey, we need to, make this better than just look, weight and stuff. So I said, let's compare this to body stats. How much fat, how much muscle you have. And that's when electrical impedance was brand new.
Right.
Okay. It was like they had all this. And so I came out I said, okay, first I went back to the library, looked up everything I could find on body statting, and everyone was doing 2 or 3 sites. And the Air Force had done a 6-site body stat test. So I just said, well, okay, bodybuilders, you want to know what's going on? So I did a 10-point site and later it's now a 9 because we dropped the hamstring because sometimes that was too hard to get. So we had a 9-point site. And in the beginning, I would divide that by the body weight and you'd get a number. And that's when everybody was dieting on like 600 calories for the Olympia and stuff. So, and if that, even though their weight was going down, if the ratio went up, that means they were losing more muscle and fat and they had to eat more. And so then we started, by that time we had pretty well known, you don't eat dairy products, you don't eat certain things, and you want, it turned out vegetables were so good, of course, with the protein. And I don't care what you do when you eat, and oatmeal will come in that class because it's got a lot of fiber. You should eat at least, if you eat a cup of potatoes, you should eat a cup of broccoli, better too. And what that does, it holds in your stomach longer because it's harder to digest, and that takes the peaks out of your insulin.
Yeah.
So, and vegetables, and there's a doctor here who she knows a nutrition program in that. And so, but how many, she literally has a 35 to 40% compliance rate on a diet. And she works with people that are in Hamilton, Ohio, and they call it Hamiltucky, kind of making, which is a blue collar neighborhood. Okay.
Right.
So you go now and she's just on the computer. She's got to fill out all the stuff to get paid in that, but she came up with a very effective diet, which and the people that do it, she'll get some, they'll be in their 60s or 70s and they'll be obese or grossly obese. And you don't have that much time to spend with them, and everything they've learned, it hasn't done them any good. So her diet is one sentence: I want you to pound the vegetables with every meal. Wow. And they might not eat a pound, but they get a lot. And she says the average person will lose 30, these are grossly obese, 30 to 70 pounds the first year.
Wow. Impressive.
Just by, what kind of vegetables?
I love it. I like the simplicity.
Yeah, it really worked. And so then where was I? I was doing the body stats. And so I started, and then there's always a fudge factor in there. Okay. We 9 sites in millimeters. And why do we use millimeters? So that's what's on the calipers. Okay. And divide by your body weight. And then you got to say, I got to turn that into body fat. So we had some people at the time, they were going up to Indianapolis, and they had the latest, greatest underwater weighing system. Okay. So you didn't even have to get all the air out of your lungs because the computer, you breathe in this thing and the computer would figure how much air you had in your lungs, and it was supposed to be super accurate. Well, the fudge factor, and I had already found out you couldn't use that for getting somebody ready for a contest, and I'll tell you why in a second. But the fudge factor, we just took averages of what people were coming out with percent body fat. So you take that ratio and multiply it times 0.27, and that'll give you your percent of body fat. That was just going over to an average. We were working with people between 5 and 20% body fat, and that kind of correlated, so everybody would be on the same page. And then why doesn't underwater weighing work? It's the gold standard. Okay. And I remember guys coming back from there and I'd say, oh, hey, you're looking bad. No, my body fat went up, da, 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 da. And one guy, he was getting ready to go in and he had to crepitate, fart. Okay. But he held it. He really held it in there the whole time. Right. He got out and let out this huge fart, like boom. And the guy goes, let's do it again. 2% body fat.
Wow. That's huge.
Because that's it's making you more buoyant.
Yep.
And so and the calipers are, I mean, you can literally, I could probably do it in under a minute, but 2 or 3, 4 minutes is all you need to do the sights. And so, and the accuracy in it is using 9 sights. And it's until you get really good at doing people where you can really remember where to take their body fat. In fact, I remember some people would, their body statting somebody and they're arguing with them and that. So they say, oh, you took it wrong. So I know a lot of people over the years would take a magic marker every time they did it and put a dot there. So they hit the exact same spot. Once you get good at it, you can basically do it on everybody. So started learning a lot. And then I was a local NPC judge and then became a national judge. And so I started working with more and more better people. I mean, worked with Linda Murray when she won the for first Olympia. And a lot of guys. And in the June issue of Muscle Mag, Greg Zulak, for 2 years, he had been saying, hey, I want to go down and interview, during out of Toronto or whatever. I want to go interview this Parrillo. And Kennedy's, he's a sham. Nobody could eat and lose fat. I had people getting contests at 8,000 and 10,000 calories.
Wow.
And they look fantastic. And so finally he said, to hell with it. He grabbed Greg Zulak and he came down and I just went over everything I was doing. Here's how we do the body stats. Here's how you do this. And doing the stretching, the fascial stretching. Okay, that's when you get a pump. And this is, there was never a time when I said, hey, I have this idea, let's do this. It's just by working with people and making them better, you just instinctively start doing things that works. So there's the fascial stretching, not myofascial. I don't even know if they had myofascial named at that time, but the fascial stretching is stretching after every set when you have a pump. And the pump actually makes the muscle shorter because the biggest volume you could get under a specific area is a sphere.
Right.
So as that muscle pumps up, it wants to get shorter. So after every set, you just stretch for 10 or 15 seconds the muscle group you're training. And that really worked. And then for people, let's say we're and this is going over 5 to 10 years. The people like were wrestlers that always got hit, in the arms and stuff. You found out their fascia was really tight. And so I started massaging and it came out with fascial planing. You pump the muscle, then you go into a fascial stretch. So the muscle is really taut. And then you take your knuckles and indent it at the, you always go insertion origin and you indent it and just go up it really slow. So you're stretching it for that part all the way up the muscle. And a friend of mine just got in, he won. He got in over 70 Mr. Tennessee.
Wow.
And he won that, and he got in the over 62. He came in third in the over 60. And he used to compete, I mean, 40 years ago.
Right.
And so he's in Tennessee. So my wife and I drove down there. It's like, and he always had like really good lats and stuff. Okay, let's see a lat spread. And nothing would come out. So I worked with him, showed him the stretches, got him to work on his posing, and I planed him, I think 5 weeks out and then 2 weeks out. And it brought just all this separation in his legs. And he won. So that's
awesome.
Yeah. And looking back at it, it's like there's no epiphany. I got it. I know what to do now. You just
do it.
But you just start doing it. And when Greg Zulak says, I show him the fascial planing, he says, what do you call that? I went,
I don't know.
Digital fascia manipulation. So we made up names for stuff I was doing for several things.
Right.
While he was interviewing me. And Brisbaugh said, I learned more in these 3 days than I have learned in the last 7 years, just going over everything.
Yeah, that's awesome. I bet.
So I tend to make a science out of it and make it systematic. And then you find out things like, okay, if you keep the fats, and you got to make sure you take an essential fatty acid source, you keep the fats, if you can get them at 5%, then you eat the right carbs that don't spike your insulin, and you eat a lot of protein, you can gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. When I had that going on, like when Ron Love, I was working with him, and he first pro show, first Olympia, he came in 8th, and they had the European tour. He was on 8,000 calories at the time.
Wow.
So he kept eating like that. And he went to the European tour where they had 10 contests scheduled. And every contest, he would pick off one person who beat him and then they dropped a couple. They're still going to have the 8th one. And they canceled it. He was so pissed. He said, all I had to beat was Vince Taylor, and I had him.
One person away.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So, like I said, if you're eating that much, you don't like you can throw your metabolism haywire by starving yourself, and then and then throwing a Hail Mary, like you sodium deplete, and then you carb load, or you sodium load, then you sodium deplete, you carb load, and that can work, but you're never really able to know what your next results are going to be, because you throw a Hail Mary every time. So
right.
I don't know how many times, I mean, thousands of times, you're talking with somebody on the phone and they say, what should I do? This is the last week. We're coming up. What should I do? What should I do? Well, how do you look? Oh, I look good. Comparatively, how do you look? I look better than I've ever looked. And so you look better than ever you look. You're better than your last contest. And so keep doing what you're doing. Don't mess it up.
Right. No, so, it's good to hear.
And if you eat more carbs at the end, and some people will go lower, if you eat more carbs at the end, it's if they're vegetables, potatoes and things like that, to carb up on to fill out your glycogen stores, then you naturally get in more potassium as opposed to sodium.
Right.
And so your potassium sodium ratio goes up, and you want that to happen because your aldosterone that your aldosterone is the hormone that controls your potassium sodium balance.
Right.
If you eat almost no sodium, and then your aldosterone level go way up, so you don't lose all the sodium in your body, because your heart works on a sodium potassium pump.
Right.
A lot of things do. And so if you go out and you eat, let's say you go out, okay, I'm going to start eating pancakes and stuff like that. A lot of times, if your aldosterone levels are real high, you'll end up looking like the Pillsbury Doughboy.
Right. Right.
So that's kind of a quick history. Now I'm working with, here's another thing. I started getting calls from people when and even in Europe and stuff, who were, hey, and that's when I just came out with the CAP-TRI. Send me your double-blind crossover studies. Da, 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 da. And I just spent 8 years in analytical sciences, and it's like double-blind crossover studies. And at the time, I was training this girl who got her pro card, and she had this boyfriend this guy was just, he had like 160 IQ. He had the perfect physique. And he would come down with her, and she was from Cleveland, and they do the belt squats. And I remember one time, first I hooked her up to the belt squat, and he had a mirror behind it, where she was doing them, and so you could see what was going on. So I'm doing it the whole time. He's got an Olympic bar with a 45 on each side, and he's curling it, and he just curled it for the whole time that I hooked her up to the belt squat, did the first set, and then unhooked her. It was so she was in the Arnold's Classic where she got her pro card.
Okay.
He goes, and he was always asking me, and I'd, hey, what about, this CAP-TRI? What is this? And I'd send him the latest scientific information. He says, you got a couple more scientific things on that. I might be ready to try it. And I go, Jesus, your girlfriend just, won her pro card, and
just try it.
and I thought, let's see, I can spend these double-blind crossover studies, because I knew what that entailed. So I could spend the next 2 years doing a study, and then they would, okay, you got anything else? It's like, and by that time, I had the perfect experimental group. Okay, all these things that come out of universities where, okay, we did a study on this, we did a study on that. So what do? They go down the weight gym, and they said, I need some bodybuilders. And then they do it on that. Okay. I was working with some of the best people in the world. And I had an experimental group that some of them for 3-4 years could tell you exactly everything that went into their body. And we made them better. And so I just started telling people, here's what we do. And that's when things took off. When I first said you could gain muscle and lose fat at the same time, it was heresy.
Yeah.
Sure. My first articles, I got a couple little articles and things, and they'd always put a disclaimer on. This is what he says, but there's no way you can eat 10,000 calories and gain muscle and lose fat. But yeah, if you know what you're doing, you can. And that's just by trial and error body stat. And then you learn something, and okay, that's what you're doing, and then you refine it, and you refine it, and you refine it, and you refine it. So that's how I got started. And then I remember when that article came out, I had a nutrition program laid out. It's basically just about the same one we have now. And it wasn't to sell something to make money. It was to, when somebody's calling you and they're they're long distance, and you say, okay, I'll send them the diet track sheets. Here's what you got to do, blah, 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 blah. And it would take about 6 months. We were talking apples and apples, oranges and oranges. Okay. Because you find out, yeah, I mean, starchy carb, bread or Ezekiel bread or this or that. So I just spelled out, here's what you do. So I'd send them that, and we'd be then right on we'd be on the same plane right away. And that article hit, and God, we had to rent 2 IBM copiers, which the drums in them could hold 2 pieces of paper on each drum, and they could copy at 60 copies a minute, which for that time was just totally unheard of. And we had 2 of those. We were running them all day, and on the weekends we'd come in and run them, and we stacked the boxes up against the wall. And on Monday we'd start sending them out, and that basically changed a lot in the bodybuilding world, because you have the top people doing it, so then it filters down.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear you talk about that. Like you said, it was heresy back then, and kind of it's funny because it's almost like it's against the grain now. Everybody's been talking about eating low carb and intermittent fasting, and you're kind of the opposite. You kind of eat like what I personally prefer is more of a higher carbohydrate, lower fat kind of thing. So I'm curious, how to talk to you a little bit more about that, because not just from a body composition, but from a health perspective too, right? Because everybody always says, oh my gosh, if you don't eat any fat, your hormones are going to bottom out. You're going to,
but you got to make sure you get an essential fatty acid source. Yep. 2 or 3 evening primrose tablets, a tablespoon or 2 of flaxseed oil is plenty.
Yeah.
And I remember when we started doing it, we had all the fats low, didn't worry about essential fatty acids, and people would start breaking out, their joints would hurt. So put on evening primrose oil. Within 3 days, their complexion was straightened out, and their joints didn't hurt anymore. So you find out things like that.
That's excellent. And have you does your we'll talk about like muscle.
Let me tell you how easy this is. Yeah. That's what I was going to do. Okay. You eat your food. Okay. And everybody, the standard model is breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Right.
So you eat breakfast, and the protein, fats, and carbs end up in your bloodstream. And so they start, the line, they start peaking, and right behind that is your insulin.
Right.
Because you key off the insulin, your pancreas dumps insulin, keeps the blood sugar down, and so what that does, it opens up the GLUT4 insulin receptors. And now we can explain scientifically what happened, but back then they didn't even have a name for a GLUT4 insulin receptor. There was no science in there. So they end up in your blood. Okay. So the pancreas dumps insulin, the GLUT4 insulin receptors, they lie in little pockets under the cell walls. And the insulin gets them to come out of those pockets and proliferate the cell wall. Now they can absorb things. So the protein, you've activated GLUT4 receptors, go into the muscle cells. The carbohydrates for energy go into the muscle cells. The fat goes into the fat cells. And you can only get things into the muscle cells so fast. So if you eat a boatload of refined carbs, you can't absorb it all at once. So you turn some of that carbs into fat, and that's spillover. So what you end up doing is you want to, and then after that meal gets digested, and then you go to, and you're in an anabolic state. Your muscle cells are growing, they're getting bigger, your fat cells are growing. Okay. Then after you digest that, then you go into a catabolic state where you start you start using fat for energy, and you start using some of the carbs in your muscles for energy. So the three swings: breakfast, catabolic, and then after that's digested, anabolic. After that's digested, you're catabolic. Same thing happens with lunch. Same thing happens with dinner.
Right.
So just about the time that you get back to that baseline for your first meal, you eat another meal, and then with rather than peaking your insulin, it's a lower insulin curve, and you don't have any spillover. So what you want to do, so you go anabolic, and then when you're going catabolic, you go anabolic again, and then it's lunchtime, you go anabolic,
Right.
and instead of having that dip going catabolic, you go anabolic again. So you stay anabolic. So what you want to do, though, is feed the muscle, not the fat.
Right.
That's simple. So by getting the fat, we say no more than 5%, which is about as low as you can get. 5% of your diet. It's so low, but if you start getting up to 10%, 15%, you'll start putting on fat. So every time you eat, so if you're eating ground turkey, if you're getting a 99%, and then you get one guy, I remember his wife had been preparing. No, he had been preparing it, and then his wife started getting the ground turkey from the store, and he put on 20 pounds of fat, and it wasn't. He was eating a lot of calories, but it was over 4 or 5 months, and finally he came in with his wife to get some supplements, and I said something about the turkey. Are you sure it's like, yeah, it's the 99%? She goes, no, I've been buying the 7%, the 93% lean.
Right.
And
right.
I mean, he switched back over, and he lost that 20 pounds in about 2 months.
Wow. It's impressive.
And you see things like happen like that. And it's not just me doing it. By this time, I was working with a lot of other trainers, and they would give me feedback. So I learned a shitload of what worked, what didn't work. There's stories like, well, hey, and you hear, how much protein can you digest? How much protein can you digest? Well, there's a trainer in Maryland, Todd Sweeney, and he was working with Ivory Turner. They called him Papoose, and who actually won the lightweight nationals, got his pro card, and so through the whole diet, it was like, I forget, it was 8 or 10 weeks. Todd kept him on an isocaloric diet of 7,000 calories.
Wow.
Okay. And he was eating his vegetables and everything. Every time he would up his protein, although then you're lowering your carbs, he would put on muscle. Up his protein, he'd put on muscle. And then the muscle would, doing the body stats, the muscle would line out. It's not, not put anymore. He'd up the protein, lower the carbs, he put on more muscle till he got up to 1,000 grams of protein a day. And that didn't work anymore.
Wow, that's a crap ton.
You say, how much can your body use? And that's even cutting carbs.
Wow.
So you got 4,000 calories by that time,
right?
Coming from protein, and probably 2,500, or you got to have some fat in there, but 2,800, coming from your carbs.
Right. Interesting. So at that point, most all your fat's coming from the MCT and the Primrose, and maybe a little bit what's in your meat. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, the MCT we don't even consider it a fat.
Yeah.
We just consider an energy source. These are
right. True.
These are calories.
Yep. Now, have you found that obviously it works? You've already told me with some of your your clients that works with men and women. What about, do you work with a lot of non-competitors who just want to be, fit, 40 or 50-year-old men and women just want to be fit and healthy? They don't want to compete, or no?
Not that many. You can't really learn much from that. So that's what the other trainers do.
Gotcha.
Right now, and I don't train a lot of people right now, but like I'm working with Steve Bake, who squats over 1,000, probably deadlifts about 950 right now, and benches 6 something. And he wants to be the world's strongest raw power lifter. He does those with no gear. He gets to wear a belt and knee wraps, and that's all.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So, and I have some unique. That's why I wish you could get down here. I have some unique pieces of gym equipment that I built that will do what they're the only pieces in the world that can do certain things.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll come down and check them out.
No, you ought to. It'll be every time you show somebody, I built a leg press, which is a mule. It's like a 20 mule tee because there's so many things on it. But I can take the momentum I can dampen the momentum out of your concentric stroke. I can adjust the force, I can adjust the force through the range of motion, and I can isolate force from mass.
Okay.
That's big.
Huge.
All that's big, actually.
Yeah,
and
that's pretty.
that's why free weights work so much better than rubber bands and springs,
Right.
Because it's just be so much easier to have stronger rubber bands, but you don't have the momentum. You don't have to start and stop a mass. And that one of the major things that does, it gives you a little more stimulus to grow muscle, but it stretches the tendons more. And you're probably, I won't say probably, but almost, I don't know how you could argue with it. Your biggest constraint to speed and power is your Golgi tendon reflex threshold.
Right.
So that's in your tendons. There's Golgi organs, yeah, I guess, and they sense the load on the muscle. And when it gets to a certain point, to keep you from injuring yourself, it interferes with the nerve impulse where it comes out of the spine and won't let it go any higher.
Right.
Because what do you think your ultimate limits would be?
Yeah, you don't know unless you remove those inhibition.
Yeah. So you've heard the stories, and it's documented many times, where the jack slips, car falls on the kid, and mom runs out, literally picks the car up and pulls him out.
Yep.
Okay. You're firing every muscle fiber you have, and you're getting rid of all the safety mechanisms.
Right. We don't come close to approaching our limits. That's for sure on a daily.
Yeah. So that's what I work on with these people.
That's excellent.
They get better.
That's amazing.
They get a lot better.
What?
In fact, most people I work with win.
That's why you are where you are. That's why everybody comes to see you.
Yeah, and I always had to have a scientific explanation behind things.
Can you talk a little bit more about the stretching? Are you referring just a plain old stretch, or I know a lot of people talk about force stretching, or they call it anabolic stretching, like providing a little bit of a resistance at the end of the stretch in between sets? Is that what you're talking about, or you just
like you do your set, you don't apply resistance unless you're doing, let's see, what is it, proprioceptive facilitation.
Yeah.
So you push against it, and then you relax and you stretch a little bit more. No, you're just stretching real hard for 10 to 15 seconds between every set. For that muscle you're working, like if you're working hamstrings, you go put your leg up and stretch, and and then arch your back so you really isolate it.
I know you talk a lot about mixing up your rep ranges to optimize not just, anabolic signaling, but growth hormone, higher weights, lower reps, and then adding some higher rep rates at the end. But what do you incorporate a lot of the other advanced techniques like eccentric training, drop sets, rest pause, and things like that? Or
Rest pause, not big on.
yeah,
Eccentric training, that's where your biggest stimulus to grow muscle comes from.
yep,
Because when you a muscle fiber is it's either contracted or not. Okay, so when you do your concentric, like you put bench press, you push up, then you usually, unless I'm working with them and pushing down, but usually then you relax the nerve impulse. You don't fire as many muscle fibers, and the myosin is trying to run up the actin, can't, and that's when you get the micro tears,
right,
and it creates inflammation. That's your stimulus to grow muscle.
right,
So yeah, we work with that a lot.
yeah,
But I have, in fact, I've designed a lot of gym equipment. My pieces have forced rep handles on. It's and they do, and it's not just for the eccentric. It's so they can do more, just more reps. They can open up the high threshold nerve paths. They can fire more muscle fibers.
okay,
The high threshold nerve paths. A normal person that doesn't work out uses about 15% of their muscle.
right,
Okay, and then a nerve impulse, it fires the same muscle fibers, when you're not trying to rep it out. Okay, when you're not going to exhaustion or anything. So you getting senior moment here. Wait a minute. So okay, yeah. So I don't know where it's going with that. Anyway,
that's okay.
I do that. No, I'm ADD big time.
Yeah.
So actually, if you learn how to control it, that can really help you.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I was curious. I was curious about how you would incorporate that, and you kind of answered that in terms of the eccentric training, in terms of mixing that in with your normal reps, or just periodizing it. Mixing it in with your normal routines.
Yeah, and we do, as well as the getting more micro tears on the eccentric, we actually get more reps in. You can just help them keep going. You can pull the pins all the way down the weight stack, and that will allow you, that does a whole lot of things. This is why I don't like rest pause, or when you start a set, you don't stop, you don't pause in it, you don't there you're, and if so, you're stressing the energy. Just a second. So you're stressing the energy systems in the muscle. So you're adding more mitochondria. You got to clear more waste products. So you increase your capillary density. And then once you increase your capillary density, you can grow more muscle.
Right.
If you can't feed the muscle, you can't grow it. So we do some hellacious sets.
How often do you mix up your routines in terms of sets and rep ranges, periodization, or even whole routines? Do you keep a steady set routine and mix up the rep?
No, I do. Everything is how you feel on a day, what you're doing, and you go through it and try to help them, do more than they can do. So everything, I never say, okay, today we're going to do, so many reps and this and so many sets of this. I just play it by ear and adjust each workout according to what's going on, how the person feels. And most of the people I work with will not have a bad day. They'll force themselves. But I have how many sets, how many reps. Hey, if you say I'm going to do 5 sets of 20 reps and they're easy, well, you up the weight and do some more.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you got to push your body to what it can do, past what it can do, so then it'll work to get to there.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And how do you feel about training, women versus men in general? I know there's a lot of nuances there, but
Train them just the same.
Yep. Okay. Perfect.
Like on the belt squat. Louis Simmons showed me the exercise where we'd hold on to the side of the power rack and have 2 benches with our feet on it, hang the weight between your legs. And so I built a belt squat, and actually, so it was when we were pushing out, we were sumo. I was a sumo squatter, deadlifter. So you'd push the benches over. So
Okay.
I finally built a platform, which was a foot up, and then had a big pole you held on to. And later, now that's on rollers. But that was, you can really push people past what they can do. I had a power lifter. Okay. And here's what. So this guy was about 220. He was about 5'6", and he had just a mesomorph. This guy had a stocky frame and not a whole lot of fat on him.
Right.
And and he had a 600-pound competitive squat. Now that's back in the late 80s. That was good, damn good. Mm-hmm. But so what we did is we worked on his Golgi tendon reflex threshold by and most people, if they can squat 600 pounds with the weight between their legs, they can only do 300 to 400 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we do, and we actually have 200-pound plates now. We didn't have them at the time, but you could put 540 pounds between your legs. So, and I mean, as soon as you start going down, or by the time you're a third of the way down, the Golgi tendon reflex threshold kicks in, and you just don't have any more. You feel like you're totally out of energy, but you're out of energy just from what you can do up to that. So we always use a spotter. So we'd put 4 and 540 pounds on there, and he couldn't do that by himself, but we sometimes we use as much as 5 spotters, but one behind him, one under each arm, one pushing up on each leg. And you get them to do, and that really stretching your tendons, and that really ups the threshold. Okay. Then we did 100 rep sets with 100-pound, we got steel cutouts, 100-pound plates, and we do 100 rep sets. Wow. And sometimes when we did the camps and stuff, you get 5 spotters, and they would switch every 20 reps. But so the weight got the Golgi tendon reflex threshold, and the reps opened up all the high threshold nerve paths, so he's firing more of the muscle at once. 4 months later, he got in a power meet and squatted 740.
Wow. Dang.
But amazing. He had the rest there.
Right.
He had the muscle fibers.
Interesting. I just read something about I know other people have talked about before the 100 rep set, so that's pretty interesting. Are you doing like 4 different exercises, 20 reps each, or the same exercise, 100 straight reps?
Well, leg press will do the same exercise, and then we have a 5 exercise times 20 reps. and for the same muscle group. And that's actually real effective for stimulating muscle growth.
Yeah.
And because it basically, it's not a whole lot for the Golgi tendon reflex threshold, but it's the high threshold nerve pass opens everything up, and really it really taxes all the systems,
Yeah, for
the
sure.
blood supply, the energy.
Is that something they would do like once a week, once a month, or just kind of varies?
Sometimes, okay, they're working a body part, and then so after they're done, they do 1 or 2 or 3 sets of those.
Gotcha. So you've done you've been very successful with your supplement line as well. Are there any unique products you want to discuss? I mean, I know you got into the MCT way before everybody else did, but
I basically introduced it to the general public.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I've tried your MCT product. I use it every day.
It's pure C8.
Mhm.
For almost 30 years, we didn't tell anybody it was pure C8.
Yeah,
it was the only one on the market. Everybody knew it just worked better. And then with some other people really hyping it, they finally figured out, hey, C8 works better. And it works better because all the C8s are digested through the portal vein into the liver.
right.
And all the C8s are turned into ketones. And that conversion process, you lose about 20% of the energy as heat. So that cranks your metabolism. And some of the C10s don't. They go in through the lymphatic system. So you don't get that energy generation. Now, they're small enough, they can get into the mitochondria of the cell to be used for energy through passive diffusion.
Right.
But you and then you'll basically digest that just like a regular fat, go through beta oxidation, takes 2 carbons off at a time.
Right.
And so you won't get as many ketones, and you won't get as much energy produced.
Right. And that's something you can crank up more especially if they're trying to lean out and cutting back on the carbs even more.
Yeah, we had one guy, Scott Wells, got in USA heavyweight, his first contest. He came in 6th, which was good, but he was super sensitive to carbs. And that's when we were just coming out with the cap try. So if he just, things happen. People are different. Roger Stewart, we got him ready for contests eating pizza. He just had a real high need for fat and for sodium. And so there's, what we tell you to do, and by doing body stats with it, you'll eventually work out the perfect diet for you. So anyway, Scott Wells he was eating 6 meals a day, got up to 10 tablespoons a meal.
Wow, that's a lot.
And came in 6th in the USA, which is his first national contest, and that was pretty damn good.
That's impressive. That's a lot of MCT.
Yeah.
Well, I know obviously you have your amino formula, liver formula, you have some things for like energy endurance recovery as well.
Yeah. Max endurance. It's all our stuff, and we don't jump on the latest bandwagon.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what we know works, and we're usually pretty slow about getting a product to the market, but when we get it on there, it's absolutely the best. Here's one thing with my supplements, okay? And we're at a period right now where we retired from production. Somebody's going to take that over, okay? But and any day now we should be back up in production. So I've learned that by doing diet tracks and body stats over the years, all our ingredients are picked on or tested on what happened, body stats. Okay, you got the same person doing it, and like you'll look for a protein powder. Ours are all isolates, but there'll be maybe 3 of them that have close to the same specs. when you put them into somebody's diet, some in an instance or two, we've got 3 times results with one for putting on muscle as the other, with the specs are the same. So all our ingredients are done by diet tracks, what works the best.
Right.
And that's where I don't know anybody else doing that.
Yeah. No, I don't either. So talk about what's going on with Parrillo Performance, because I know you said there's been some changes. You're selling some things to other people. Like what
We're
are you
selling to production. It'll be made on the same equipment with the same ingredients. It'll be exactly the same.
Okay.
If it says Parrillo, there won't be a compromise.
Gotcha. Excellent. And training gym or changes there, you said too?
Yeah, we have a 30,000 square foot facility. 5,000 square foot was a gym, and a friend of mine graduated from med school, so Dr. Gearman. So I had 2 little body stat rooms. We made that into one room, and he just got out of med school. So he started working with people out of that. And now he's basically taken over the whole thing. And he is physical medicine rehab. The guy is absolutely phenomenal. He's a savant when it comes to ultrasound. The 2 doctors independently tell me that. He'll put just like Scott Canazzi used to train people at the gym. And for 2 years, he had ice in his shoulder because it hurt. Scott would not miss a workout. It wouldn't happen. So Doc says, oh, let me look at it. So he ultrasounds him, and it was just one little pocket. Usually it looks black where the inflammation is. He just put a little squirt of something in there. Scott walked out there going, hey, wow, this feels great. Until he injured it 2.5 years later, his shoulder never hurt again.
Excellent.
So he's so good. And he works with a lot of professional athletes, baseball, football players, and even with world-class jiu-jitsu and martial artists.
Right.
They're always hurting.
So what's next for John?
So what we had to do is we had to take part of the warehouse and move the hardcore equipment into that, because you can't be doing Botox on somebody and scream like, get him over.
No, that doesn't jive, does it?
No.
That's excellent. So what's next for John Parrillo as things go through and there's a transition period? What do you got planned?
I'm gonna still be around.
Yep.
I'm keeping my gym and I'm keeping my shop. And I've learned not to build gym equipment. I used to design it, but to get my equipment fixed, let me get another drink. Production equipment, it was costing me 2, 3, sometimes a lot more than that a month to have people come in and service it.
Right. Oh yeah.
So a very good friend of mine I think he passed away, but he was the last the last machinist. He went through Millicrun's 8,000-hour course, where he had to learn like grinders, lathes. He had to learn everything, be able to know how to make it, know how to repair it, know what it can do, know how to program it. And so I said, okay, I bought a mill like his, Wells Index, and I bought a LeBlanc lathe, 15, 60-inch servo shift, which is a couple of the best pieces you can get. And his brother is a machinist too. And those guys taught me how to do things. And so when I started repairing things, I just wouldn't repair it. I'd make sure it didn't break again.
Yeah.
And that could be redesigning parts of it. That can be when you're out there doing a repair to somebody, you got to get them back up as quickly as possible. But but you don't do certain things, like you don't use maybe the right lubricant. Well, this is good, this will work, but you don't have it. Some of these things say really specialized lubricants, and you don't have on the threads, you don't put any Teflon stuff on there. So, so you take it apart 6, 10, 20 years later, it's all rusted. You put some Teflon, on the and not the Teflon tape, but actually Teflon on the bolts. And I've had some stuff I've had to take apart after 20 years. It just comes right apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing's frozen up.
That's fantastic. What are some any memorable people that you've met through the years, or memorable lessons you learned from working with all the people you've worked with through the last number of years?
Memorable lessons. What I've learned is these are people that are so dedicated, and it's just they're a lot. Most of them are amazing people.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Do you have any visits plans or trips planned? I'm assuming do you still go to a lot of shows, competitions like the Olympia, the Arnold, things like that throughout the year?
No, we don't do that anymore. In fact, I was one of the original exhibitors at the Arnolds. We were there for probably 20 years.
Yeah.
And they had 6 or 7 spots when they used to have it. I forget what the auditorium was, but at the, big fancy place, old place. So the bathrooms were downstairs and they had a lobby down there. And I was one of the original ones. And so that was great. And then they moved to the convention center and they started changing it. It outgrew us. We used to go there and see everybody we knew. Hey, this was great. And then the trainers would show up. And then all of a sudden, I remember the last year we were there, the aisles were so packed. There was someone we really recognized, been working with for years. They couldn't make it from the middle of the aisle to our booth. Just had to stand there and slowly move.
Right.
And I said, this isn't doing us any good anymore. So, but they, and people used to go there to see what the latest gym equipment was and what this was. Then that got so watered down with all the other sports they put in there. It's great for just general sports, but it's just for hardcore bodybuilders what it started out as. It's right. That's only a couple percent of it now.
Yeah, I know it has changed a lot. I remember going years ago and how it's changed over the years and gotten way busier and way bigger. It makes it a little bit difficult. Right. So that's for sure. Are you reading any? Do you read reading any good books right now, John? Not related to muscle or training or nutrition?
Any good books?
I always ask everybody this.
No, I usually read scientific stuff.
Okay, all right.
And that so you're not like reading through a book. You're picking out certain things you want to do.
Absolutely. We'll plug your website. Anything else? If there's anything you want to talk or plug or promote, feel free to say it. And
just we're out of products right now in this switchover, and it's amazing. People call us and says, I can't find an alternative that works as good as yours.
Really?
And yeah, and I've had nobody say, hey, I found one that works as good as yours.
That's
They'll go out to buy the top of the line and that, but it's not like yours.
That's the best testimonial you could ask for.
Yeah, and that's the diet tracks and body stats on ingredients.
Absolutely.
We even specify one of our proteins is made in several plants across the United States, but we specify what plant it comes out of.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, when we get it.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, John, and let you run. I appreciate you jumping on here. It was an honor to meet you, and I appreciate it. And hopefully, everybody enjoys your stories and your wisdom. And you've got a lot to share. So I definitely
I still got a lot to go, and I'd really like to get you down here.
okay. I'll get down there. I'll have to I'll make a visit.
All right. Hey, and maybe we can do a Zoom of you working out.
Absolutely.
That
That'd
would
be
be,
fun.
maybe do that with Steve and Jimmy and some of the big boys.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.